And I did say this before, but I'll say it again because I still get a lot of questions about it. If you do not like the grades that you're getting on the quizzes, you will have an opportunity to retake. Basically, anytime that we're doing independent practice, you can ask for a retake and I'll give you the password, but you need to be ready for it. Like, you need to have already looked at your first attempt, which they're both viewable. You need to know how to do a similar problem because it probably will not be the same exact question and just memorize answers. You have to actually know how to solve a similar question. And then, when you retake it, you're still allowed to use your notes. There's no reason you shouldn't do better on the retake, and you're only entitled to one retake. Like, you don't get like a million. So that's why I say you need to be ready when you ask for a retake. You can ask me questions basically during independent practice time is when you can ask questions and or retake. So if you didn't like that quiz score, you can ask to retake it later when we have independent practice time. The first lesson we are doing today is about translating expressions. So basically things that are written in sentences, making it now like either an expression or an equation, something with numbers, letters, symbols. So that was a very missed question on the final, the ones where you had to set up the problem and solve it. So we will also be doing solving equations today, but very basic ones. Tomorrow you will get into the multi-step equations and inequalities. So very like important stuff that we're going over. These lessons are not something that I normally get to teach all my Algebra 1-2 students, really only my Math Lab students. They expect you to have all of this prior knowledge when you come into ninth grade. So the better that you're able to grasp these lessons that we're doing today and tomorrow, the better off you'll be for the rest of high school. Like, these are very like fundamental, basic, key skills, and you need to be able to execute them. So yeah, I did grade your finals. I did put it in the grade book. It's not affecting your grade whatsoever, the one that says pre-test. So one person in here did already pass the final, so that's great because that's one of the requirements to pass the final, to pass the class. And with the attendance, it was said like there's the second to last day of summer school that we take the final. That next day is only for people who need to retake it. So that person that got a 60% already doesn't have to worry about coming on that very last day. Everyone else needs to plan to be here because I don't know why people think that they're going to be able to pass it the first time around. It's actually very hard to do that. In the normal school year, it's not a requirement to pass it. Pass the class. You get like a 0% on it, it's still pass if you're underrated high enough. For summer school, because you're doing like just a fraction of the work than like a normal school year, but it's still replacing that grade. You could get an A in here and it replaced that grade on your transcript. That's why it's a requirement. So I'm gonna pass out a paper that looks like this, and on it, you are going to put some keywords and phrases that tell you to add, subtract, multiply, divide, like from prior knowledge. Because again, like I said, so that should be prior knowledge, but for some reason it's not. So just list all the ones you can think of. And then if you're not thinking of a whole lot, there's a whole bunch of examples on the front and back. Read some of those phrases and start like sorting them. So like when it says the product of a number and three, think about where product goes. It's in this little organizer. And then I'll call on you and we'll go over it. Any questions on anything I said? Okay, so it'll be passed back to you, so if I give you multiple, make sure you pass them back. Give you 2 minutes to write down as many as possible. And here's actually what I need. So let's do a couple that are. So like an easy one for that tells you to add with like the word sum. Right? When you see the phrase or word rather sum, you know that you need to add whatever it's talking about. For subtraction, an example of what we're looking for would be difference. So if I'm asking for the difference between a number and 4, then I'm doing n minus 4. For multiplication, you could do times. Number times 5. So we multiply. And division, you can do, it's not really remedy, but I'll just put in one. Divided by. There's so many others. If you're already thinking of others, great. Put them in this list. If you get stuck, look on the paper, the eyes open, I can stand it actually look them, say wait. Look on the paper for other words and classify them. What operation does it tell you to do? Yes. Okay, Hayden, give me a key word or phrase that tells me to add. Not one. Can we find one from maybe the examples that are down here? Any of these other than some, because I already have some. Any of these tell me to add. Read all of them. Okay, let's try it back then. Sorry about that. Okay. I saw at least 2 other examples with from reading these examples, plus there's so many more that aren't on this paper. So think of one, we'll come back to you. It just gets harder though, because I'm so much here, we have to come up with another one. Lakeland, can you give me one? Yes. Increase. Increase by, or just increases by. That was in this example. So in this example, we'll definitely have a +1 going on. We still have to translate the rest of it. Jenny, another one for addition. Cool. All right, good, easy, simple. Logan, another one. Which one? Logan B. So So product is actually something else. It's not addition or division. What is it? So let's add that to this list. Product is the answer to a multiplication problem. So like 24 is the product of 8 times 3. All right, Aiden, did we find one? Sure, what do you want? All right. Minus, good. I would have said that. Opposite of plus is minus. Kyle, do you have one for addition or subtraction that's not already up here? Addition? Oh, division would be. Quotient, good. That's the answer to a division problem. So like sum is the answer to addition, difference is the answer to subtraction. So we have all those, kind of like try to find the opposites of these. Let's see. Gianni, any others for addition? What did you think? More than. That one was, I got from the back. I forgot about that one before. But looking at the back, whenever it says 3 more than something else, you know that you're at 3. Another one that's on my key that I don't think anyone would automatically think of is total. So like if you said the total dollars spent, what is this? You know that whatever other things you add would have to be added to give you that total, right? So there's that one. James, do you have another one for subtraction? Decrease 5, the opposite of increase. Layla, do you have another one for subtraction? Less than. Less than, I'm also gonna put a star next to. Because that's gonna go in another box. And it's gonna go in one of our turnaround phrases. So when you hear the less than, we are still talking about subtraction, but the order will be switched. And it's probably easier to see from an example. But otherwise, whenever you're translating any of these, go in the order that it's being read, unless you see one of these turnaround phrases, which we're gonna put here. Less than is considered turnaround states. Switch the order. All right, so order matters in subtraction and division. It doesn't matter so much in addition and multiplication. But it's still in the order it reads it, unless you see one of those phrases that we said are turnaround phrases. There's one more for subtraction that is also a turnaround phrase. Does anyone know it? Yes. Well, it's if it says subtracted. Not by, that's a turnaround, but anyone else? Run. So subtracted by is also like telling you to subtract, of course, but when you see subtracted from, you want to put like a star next to that one's also a turnaround phrase. Because when we have something subtracted from something else, we need to make sure that we're not going in the order that it's been read, that we're going in like a switched order. So then from, I need the people remember to switch the order. All right, so we got a lot for addition, subtraction. Let's fill in for multiplication and division. Question or answer? Twice is for multiplication. That twice is specifically multiplying by what? Good. If we're doing like twice a number. Times it by 2. Twice a 3 is 6. Times it by 2. You could also say the same for double as well. I'm gonna put a slash here for double, because that's also multiplying by 2. But then you can also do triple, quadruple. I'm just gonna go up to triple. Yeah. But that one is multiplying by 3 if it's tripling. Also on my list, which I think is a little bit unusual. I mean, it's not that unusual, but the word of. So if you said like 10, you could do 1 times 10 if it's 5. That's technically multiplication. Now, if you are doing like you're halving something like half or even like a third, that is still also considered division, because when you half something, you're also dividing by 2. Or if you're taking a third of something, you're technically dividing by 3. They're like the same thing, just like formatted a little bit differently. Doing half of a number is the same thing as taking that number and dividing by 2. So just however you want to break it. Anyone have any others for division? Yes, Loganus. Dividend. Dividend is something else, I think. I think dividend is what you divide by. And I don't know that you would see it in your expressions that you need to translate. Dividend, I mean, I'll Google it when we have a break. But I'm gonna wait to add it to this list then. I think a dividend is what you divide by. Layla? Multiplied by, we could add to this list. For division, the other ones that it has is separate, which I don't see often, but I guess if we're separating into groups of 3, like we're dividing by 3. And then divided by, well, I already have that one. But I'll have to check on the one that Logan said. I don't have much for division. But also when you guys get to your quiz tomorrow and it has like real world examples, just be able to identify what operation you should do based off of that. Like if I'm buying 3 snacks for all of you, I have to multiply. I have to take what the new are so that I have enough snacks, multiply it by 3 versus like dividing. I shouldn't have less than what the amount of people I have. So just trying to like use your critical thinking skills in math. Now for parentheses, if you see these phrases, it's probably suggesting that you use parentheses, and that will be things like times the sum of. You could also do like divided by the sum of. But you could also do times the difference of. And the parentheses would go like where I put the quotation marks. So think about your order of operations. It normally goes parentheses, exponents, multiplying, dividing from left to right, addition, subtraction from left to right. So you're like 8 steps, 4 things that you do. Unless there's parentheses around the addition and subtraction, then I'm going to normally multiply first. So that's why if you see things that say like times the sum of, times the difference of, I would need to put parentheses around whatever phrase they're finding the difference of, because then that will bump it up to my first set for equation and X. Okay, so just when you see those phrases, you put parentheses. Questions on filling any of this out? Okay, so now the translating part. I have the product of a number and 3. Product tells me to do what operation? Good, it tells me to multiply. Do we know what they mean by a number? N, so like pick a variable in most cases. Like, don't just pick any random number. If they say times a number, they're not specifying, they probably want you to use a variable. We use variables for unknowns account. So we're doing the product of a number and 3. Me just going like left to right how I read, I would put it in this order. Don't use an X for multiplication anymore. If you do, still. Do the dot, use parentheses, smush them together because if there's no symbol, multiplication is implied. However, don't just do like N3 because that's technically improper. Do 3N if you're gonna smush them together. This is still telling you to multiply. All of these are. So there's that. Questions? And right now we're not solving. We're just translating. Later we'll do a solving activity. Yes? It's just for an unknown. So for all of these, I could switch the letter like to X, to A, B, C, D. Like it doesn't specify any certain variables that it wants me to use. But like say you're doing a word problem and they're talking about sandwiches. Like, I don't know, we're doing it's $3 per sandwich. And maybe you want to use an S. Like it doesn't really matter what the letter is. If the problem says though to use a specific letter, then use that letter. So that is a good question because on your quiz, it might tell you to use C for cakes or something like that. Okay, questions on others? So there's no real world things attached to this right now. It's just like the same. Let's see. Difference between a number and 10. Rodolfo, what does difference tell us to do? Subtract. Right? It's in our little subtraction list. And we don't know what number they want. And just pick any random number. So let's pick a letter. You pick X and then 10. Unless it's one of those switch phrases, go in the order that it says, especially for subtraction and division. That matters a ton. You can see for multiplication, it didn't matter as much. But for subtraction, it has to be n minus 10. Nothing else. There's no other variation other than changing the letters. Good. Okay, quotients. Wyatt, what does quotient tell me to do? Good. And we're doing it between a number and -5. So you can do, for example, x divided by -5 like this. However, more of the time in algebra, we use a division, like we use fraction for division. So that's why over here you see the slash. And let's you do what you request in your calculator. I feel like you would see it more like this than with the normal division sign. And order does matter in division. All right, or subtracted from a number. So, you know, it's subtraction. It says subtraction. But is it going to be 4 minus x or x minus 4? Only one of these is right. Think about it. Yes. X minus 4 is correct. It is not this because subtracted from is one of those like switch around phrases. Go back, turn around phrases right there. It says subtracted from, not by. From. Use some sort. All right, we have now the sum of twice the number and 7. So Kathleen, what's the sum tell us to do? Good, Natalia, what does twice tell us to do? Multiply by what specific? Whenever we're twicing something, we're multiplying on. Well, we will multiply twice a number. What needs to go here? Is that twice? Okay, it needs to be like 2n or 2x. Twice is specifically multiplying by 2. What I'm trying to say. So we're doing the sum of twice a number of the term and 7. Everyone good so far? Adam? Yes. Over here, number 6. The product of a number and 10 increased by 1. So we already talked about like the increase by 1 is adding. But that's like for the end, so that's like that. Product is what operation class? And we're multiplying an unknown and 10, so you do 10n, and times 10, same difference. I feel like you'll see 10n more often. But this I don't need any parentheses for because we would multiply before adding anyway. So it's that order of operations, we multiply before adding. So that's why we're doing the product of the number and 10 increased by 1. I'm going to give you a couple to try on the back. I'll leave these up as examples. But the ones I want you to try up here are going to be 7, 8, and 10. Even though some of them are not necessarily things you talked about, I have faith. 7, 8, and 10. That is on the back of your notes. Okay. Well, okay, so ask you to try them. I'm going to reveal to you the answers. 7, I let you try, even though there's one part of it we didn't talk about today, but I'm hoping that since the majority of you took algebra like last year, and you know, we just finished semester 2. What does it mean when something is squared? What does that look like? To the power of 2. So that's why I still have things to do like to do it. Big number. It's the little number in the corner. So when we have 4 less than, so like just reading it from left to right, less than is subtraction, but it is also a switch around word too. So keep that in mind. Then a number would be like a variable, and that variable is going to be squared. But of course, since we had that than, we do need to switch the order of these. So the answer is x squared minus 4. Let's see the right answer. Good there. All right. Number 8, twice a number divided by 5 could look like this. You could use a different letter if you wanted to. You could also replace the fraction bar with the division symbol. That looks like that. Holds everything. It has to be that the 5 is second. Yeah, you can put a dot between them. That works. But also just know, like, if they're smushed together, multiplication is applied. So that'll be important. All right, number 9. I know I didn't ask you to do that one, but it's right there. This is starting to get into equations. What word tells us that we need to put an equal sign? Big word in number 10 is. So when you hear the phrase is, that is telling you to use an equal sign versus like an inequality symbol or versus like an expression where there's no sign at all for that. We have the sum of twice the number and 10 is 36. And then here's the one I asked you to do. This one you needed parentheses because it had that phrase we talked about times the difference of. You could put a dot here if you want. You don't really need to though because it's smushed up against it. Multiplication is applied. But we do need to put the parentheses around the variable plus the 7. So that would do it first. If you it is 18 means for the equal sign. Good questions, comments, concerns? Okay, so although we're not really solving inequalities until tomorrow, you might see some on your quiz just for like the translating expressions piece. So let's look at that. So inequalities, if they use phrases like any of the ones that you see in the examples, like at most, at least, limit of, no less than, things like that, you're not going to use an equal sign. You're going to use one of the 4 inequality symbols. So things like less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. Those are your 4 options for your inequality. So not like as in subtract less than, like when it says a number less than -10. I mean, I guess that one's like written as an expression too. But like if you're looking at your answer options and it's inequalities, you know that they're talking about that less. So like this one would be a number less than -10. We're talking about inequality. So that's me reading it from left to right. Know that what I'm about to write, -10 greater than x, is saying the same thing. The opening always faces a bigger number. -10 is a bigger number in this relationship. So both of these are the same. One is like how you read from left to right. The other one is still equivalent of comfortable no matter what side it's on. Does that make sense? Any questions? Good. Okay. So yeah, opening should always face the bigger number in the relationship. Let's look at one of the more, but like I think you'll see in your real world examples. So if I say at most, like at most, I can teach 45 students for the school. So let me ask you this, instead of you just telling me the sign and like memorizing phrases to signs, just like pick a sign and see if it makes sense. So if I can have at most 45, and what I actually have be greater than 45 if you're talking about at most. So then flip it. If I can have at most 45, can I have less than 45? Can I have exactly 45? Then I'm gonna put the little line under. I don't memorize phrases to symbols because of course I could write it like this too. And now it's a different symbol. But these mean the same thing. So just like think logically and flip it if it doesn't make sense. All right, a speed limit of 55 miles per hour. So we're gonna compare any variable to 5. If the speed limit is 55, can I go more than 55? So then flip the symbol. 55 should be the biggest you could go, so it makes a bigger number for the 55. If the speed limit is 55, can I go exactly 55? So then I'll put the line underneath that. It can be exactly that. That's where the equal to part comes in. And of course, you could write it like this, but the opening needs to face a 55 because this makes sense. I'm gonna give you 2 to try. I want you to try no less than and a minimum number of 5. Just try those 2. And then I'll read the activity. For a number that is no less than 10, you pick any letter, do this. If it can be no less than 10, would this be the right symbol? And then if it's no less than 10, can it be exactly 10? Yes. Or no? And here we go.
Here we go.
Okay, so a number that is no less than 10. That means whatever number we're talking about needs to be greater or equal to 10. So like you can even pick a number and check, like 20, is that greater than or equal to 10? Is that no less than 10 if I have 20? So then that works. Over here, a minimum number of 5. So let's just pick a letter, leave some space for the symbol. We're comparing it to 5. If I need a minimum of 5, can I have more than 5? Yeah, and then can it be exactly 5? So then we'll put the little line under. Questions, comments, concerns? All right, so I just passed out a paper to you, face down. It looks like this on the front. Listen carefully, because my first hour, even though I explained it, I did it wrong. You are doing either the evens or the odds. So evens would be like 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, or the right side of the page. Odds would be 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, 15, 17, 19, or the left side of the page. Okay, you want to do all 20. Okay. Either the left side or the right side. That way, we don't spend too much time on this. I'll still give you 15 minutes. So that's like more than a minute per question. So yeah, I'll start the timer for that. But you're doing evens or odds. If you have questions, you're stuck, let me know. If you just want to see, like, am I doing this right? I have the key over here where I'm motioning. Right here. You can just briefly check as you go. But otherwise, if you have a question, let me know. In 15 minutes, so almost 1:45, but not quite, we will go over the answers. I'll check it and we'll move on. I'm going to check it before we go over the answers, though. Questions? And remember, you're just translating. You are not having to solve right now. We'll do a lesson on solving after this.